A devotee. What is that story about the will of Rama? Master. In a certain village, there lived a weaver. He was a very pious soul. Everyone trusted him and loved him. He used to sell his goods in the marketplace. When a customer asked him the price of a piece of cloth, the weaver would say, "By the will of Ram, the price of the yarn is 1 rupee, and the labor 4 annas. By the will of Ram, the profit is 2 annas. The price of the cloth, by the will of Ram, is 1 rupee and 6 annas." Such was the people's faith in the weaver that the customer would at once pay the price and take the cloth. The weaver was a real devotee of God. After finishing his supper in the evening, he would spend long hours in the worship hall, meditating on God and chanting his name and glories. Now, late one night, the weaver couldn't get to sleep. He was sitting in the worship hall, smoking now and then, when a band of robbers happened to pass that way. They wanted a man to carry their goods and said to the weaver, "Come with us." So saying, they led him off by the hand. After committing a robbery in a house, they put a load of things on the weaver's head, commanding him to carry them. Suddenly the police arrived, and the robbers ran away. But the weaver, with his load, was arrested. He was kept in the lockup for the night. Next day, he was brought before the magistrate for trial. The villagers learnt what had happened and came to court. They said to the magistrate, "Your Honor, this man could never commit a robbery." Thereupon, the magistrate asked the weaver to make his statement. The weaver said, "Your Honor, by the will of Ram, I finished my meal at night. Then by the will of Ram, I was sitting in the worship hall. It was quite late at night by the will of Ram. By the will of Ram, I had been thinking of God and chanting his names and glories, when, by the will of Ram, a band of robbers passed that way. By the will of Ram, they dragged me with them. By the will of Ram, they committed a robbery in a house. And, by the will of Ram, they put a load on my head. Just then, by the will of Ram, the police arrived. And, by the will of Ram, I was arrested. Then, by the will of Ram, the police kept me in the lockup for the night. And this morning, by the will of Ram, I have been brought before your honor." The magistrate realized that the weaver was a pious man and ordered his release. On his way home, the weaver said to his friends, "By the will of Ram, I have been released." Whether a man should be a householder or a monk depends on the will of Ram. surrender everything to God and do your duties in the world. What else can you do? A clerk was once sent to prison. After the prison term was over, he was released. Now, what do you think he did? Cut capers or do his old clerical work? If the householder becomes a Jivana Mukta, then he can easily live in the world if he likes. A man who has attained knowledge does not differentiate between this place and that place. All places are the same to him. He who thinks of that place also thinks of this place. When I first met Keshab at Jayagopal's garden house, I remarked, "He is the only one who has dropped his tail." At this people laughed. Keshab said to them, "Don't laugh. There must be some meaning in his words. Let us ask him." Thereupon I said to Keshab, "The tadpole, so long as it has not dropped its tail, lives only in the water. It cannot move about on dry land. But as soon as it drops its tail, it hops out on the bank. Then it can live both on land and in water." Likewise, as long as a man has not dropped his tail of ignorance, he can live only in the water of the world. But when he drops his tail, that is to say, when he attains the knowledge of God, then he can roam about as a free soul, or live as a householder if he likes. Mohima Charun and the other devotees remained spellbound, listening to the Master's words.